My family spent a decade treating my career like a hobby and my bank account like a community chest. They funneled every spare cent, every ounce of praise, and even their own retirement into my golden sister's medical degree. But at my brother's graduation dinner, the masks finally slipped. I handed him the keys to a fully paid off house, and in that moment, my parents' secret scheme to harvest my wealth came crashing down in a chorus of screams. This isn't just a story about money. It's about the day I stopped being an ATM and started being a sister to the only person who actually saw me. Before I continue, if this story resonates with you, please take a moment to like and subscribe, but only if you genuinely connect with what I'm about to tell you. Drop a comment and let me know where you're watching from and what time it is where you are. My name's Diane, and for a long time, I was the invisible daughter. It was a Tuesday in February, and I was currently losing a battle with a brutal strain of the flu. I was wrapped in 3 layers of blankets in my Fort Worth apartment, shivering despite the heat being cranked up. My head throbbed, and my throat felt like I'd swallowed a handful of dry gravel. I hadn't seen another human being in 4 days. That's when my phone buzzed. My mother's photo, Minnie, lit up the screen. I hesitated. Usually, a call from Minnie meant a lecture or a request, neither of which I had the energy for. But I picked up, my voice coming out as a pathetic, raspy whisper. "Hello? Diane? You sound dreadful. Are you still playing sick?" Minnie's voice was crisp, lacking even a hint of motherly concern. She sounded like she was reading off a grocery list. "I'm not playing, Mom. I have a 102-degree fever. It's been rough." "Well, try to pull yourself together, Diane. I won't drag this out since you're clearly resting. You know your sister Phyllis has her final medical school payment due next week. Your father, Archibald, and I are in a bit of a tight spot. Property taxes spiked, and we had that massive leak in the roof last month." I sat up slowly, the room tilting dangerously. "Tight by how much?" "Oh, not much," Minnie said lightly, using that breezy tone she always employed when she was about to ask for something life-altering. "Just the last chunk. $20,000. I coughed, a deep hacking sound that made my ribs ache. $20,000? Mom, that's not a chunk. That's a down payment on a house. That's an entire year's salary for some people." "Don't be dramatic, Diane. This is Yale medicine we're talking about. This is Phyllis's future. This is a real career. We've sacrificed everything, remortgaged the house, sold the Buick. You could help your family for once. Surely that little online thing you do has some spare cash lying around?" There it was, the little online thing. 10 years ago, I'd started an educational tech company from a cramped garage. I spent 20-hour days coding, localizing content for 30 different countries, and building a team of 15 dedicated employees. Today, I operated out of a 20,000 square foot warehouse, and my apps were used in classrooms worldwide. I was successful by every metric that mattered, except my parents. To Minnie and Archibald, if I wasn't wearing a white lab coat or arguing in a courtroom, I was just tinkering. "Mom, I can't," I said, trying to find my spine through the fever. "Payroll is due Friday for my staff. I don't have $20,000 in liquid cash just sitting in a personal checking account. It's tied up in the business." That was a lie. I had it. I had 10 times that in a rainy day fund. But this was about the boundary I'd been trying to build for a decade. The silence on the other end of the line was icy. I could almost hear her jaw tightening. "I see," Minnie finally said, her voice dropping an octave into pure disappointment. "Well, I hope you recover soon. Some of us are out here building a legacy that actually matters. I have to go. Phyllis needs help with her residency applications." Click. The dial tone echoed like a physical blow. I leaned back against the headboard, my heart racing. Not 2 minutes later, my phone chimed again. A text from Phyllis. Mom said you're bailing on us. Don't be greedy, Daine. This is the family's big shot. If I succeed, we all succeed. Stop being so selfish. Greedy? That word burned worse than the fever. Phyllis had never held a job in her life. Her car, her rent, her organic groceries, and her designer scrubs were all paid for by my father's investments and Minnie's part-time realtor commissions. And now, apparently, they expected me to be the silent benefactor of a sister who couldn't even tell you what my company actually produced. I looked around my apartment. It was nice, sure, but I lived modestly. I poured everything back into the business. I was the one who paid my own way through state college by bartending until 3 a.m. in Fort Worth. I was the one who didn't get a graduation party because all the funds were reserved for Phyllis's prep courses. The phone buzzed again. This time it was Wasserman, Phyllis's fiancé. He was a slick sales rep who wore watches that cost more than my first car and always referred to my warehouse as the toy box. Hey, Daine, heard you're being difficult. Archibald is pretty stressed. Maybe just send the wire and skip the drama. We're all supposed to be on the same team here. I didn't reply. I couldn't. I just laid there, watching the shadows of the Texas sunset crawl across my ceiling. The flu was making me weak, but the realization was making me hard. I wasn't a daughter to them. I wasn't a sister. I was an untapped mineral vein, a resource to be mined until I ran dry. They had no idea that while they were mocking my apps, I had been quietly building an empire. And they certainly had no idea that I knew exactly where their money was actually going. They thought I was the one who was fortunate. They didn't realize I was the only one in the family who was actually solvent. And they had no clue that my brother Hawk was the only person I was planning to bring along for the ride. The flu didn't just leave me physically weak. It left me with a cold, sharp clarity that no medicine could provide. As I lay in my Fort Worth apartment, watching the emails from my office pile up, requests for international licensing agreements, payroll approvals, and logistics updates, I realized that I had been playing a character for my family for far too long. I was the struggling daughter, the one who worked a little tech job, while Phyllis was the savior in training. It all started 10 years ago. I was 24, fresh out of state college. While Phyllis was being fitted for her first set of designer scrubs to start her pre-med journey, I was working double shifts at a tech support desk and bartending until the sun came up. My parents, Minnie and Archibald, saw my life as a series of unfortunate choices. To them, my lack of a prestigious degree meant I was just drifting. I remember sitting at the kitchen table in our old house in Arlington. Archibald, a financial advisor who prided himself on his legacy clients, was looking over my shoulder as I sketched out the first wireframes for my educational app. It was a tool designed to help neurodivergent children engage with reading through interactive storytelling. "Daine, sweetheart," he had said, his voice dripping with that paternal condescension I'd come to loathe. "It's a nice hobby, truly, but you're 24. You need a 401k. You need a career with a ceiling. Look at Phyllis. She's already shadowing surgeons at the city hospital. That's a path. This is just playing with toys." I didn't argue. I had learned early on that arguing with Archibald was like trying to convince a brick wall to move. I just kept coding. I moved out of their house and into a studio apartment that was so small I had to keep my server rack in the bathroom because it was the only place with a separate ventilation fan. I lived on ramen and cheap coffee, pouring every single cent I earned into my little project. By the time I was 26, the project had a name, EduNova. I had landed my first contract with a small school district in rural Texas. It wasn't much, but it was proof of concept. I went to a family dinner to celebrate, and Minnie spent the entire night talking about Phyllis's MCAT scores. When I finally found a gap in the conversation to mention my contract, Minnie just patted my hand. That's lovely, dear. Maybe it'll pay for a better haircut. You look so tired lately. Phyllis, tell them about that young doctor you met in the cardiology ward. The pattern never broke. As my company grew, their interest shrank. When I hired my fifth employee, they asked if I was still doing the computer thing. When I moved into my first warehouse in Fort Worth, they didn't even visit. They were too busy helping Phyllis move into her upscale apartment near her medical school. They saw my success as an accident and her path as an inevitability. But something shifted about 3 years ago. Archibald's investments started to seem more urgent. He began asking me specific questions about my company's structure. He wanted to know about my liquidity and if I had any untapped assets. He framed it as fatherly advice, but his eyes had a hungry, desperate look that I didn't recognize. "You know, Daine," he had said during a quiet Sunday brunch while Minnie was in the kitchen, "you're running a business now. You should really let a professional handle the back end. I could set up a family trust. We could roll your earnings into a larger fund that would benefit everyone. It would provide a safety net for Phyllis's loans and give you some tax shelter." I looked at him, really looked at him, and realized he wasn't looking at his daughter. He was looking at a ledger. He was looking for a way to bail out the shining star of the family using the hobbyist's labor. "I have an advisor, Dad. Her name is Sloane. She's very good." The look of pure fury that flashed across his face for a split second told me everything I needed to know. I hired Sloane not just to manage my money, but to protect it from my own blood. The pressure didn't stop, though. It just became more subtle. They would invite me over for dinner and then accidentally leave a stack of Phyllis's tuition bills on the counter. Minnie would cry about how tight things were becoming, but then she'd show up the next week with a new designer handbag, claiming it was a gift from a client. I began to suspect that the tight spot they were in wasn't just about Phyllis's medical school. Yale is expensive, but Archibald was a successful financial advisor. He should have had the funds. Unless he didn't. Unless the legacy he was so proud of was built on sand. Now, lying in my bed with the flu, I finally had the time to connect the dots. The $20,000 request wasn't the first, and it wouldn't be the last. It was a test. They wanted to see if I was still the invisible daughter they could guilt into submission. I picked up my phone and called Sloane. My voice was still raspy, but my mind was sharp. "Sloane," I said, "I need you to do something for me. It's personal, and it's probably going to be messy." "I like messy, Daine. What's the target?" "My father, Archibald, and my mother, Minnie. I want a full forensic look at their finances. Every loan, every mortgage, every investment they've made in the last 5 years, and check on Phyllis, too. I want to know exactly how much medical school actually costs, compared to what they've been asking me for." "You think they're skimming?" Sloane asked. "I think they're drowning," I said, "and I think they're trying to use me as a life raft without telling me the ship is already underwater." As I hung up, I felt a strange sense of peace. For years, I had felt guilty for being the successful one, while my parents struggled to support my sister. I had felt like I owed them for the years they let me stay rent-free while I built my company, even though those years were only 18 months, and I had worked 3 jobs the entire time. The guilt was gone. What was left was a cold, calculating resolve. I was going to find out the truth. And then I was going to give my brother Hawk, the one person who never asked me for a dime and never looked down on my work, the future he deserved. Hawk was the youngest. He was 22, just finishing his engineering degree. He was quiet, hard-working, and completely overlooked. While the family was obsessed with Phyllis's medical rotations, Hawk was working in a machine shop to pay for his books. He never complained. He never asked why Phyllis got a new car and he got Archibald's 10-year-old sedan. He just kept his head down and worked. He was like me, and unlike the rest of them, he was actually going to be family. By Friday, the fever had finally broken, leaving me with a cold, hollow clarity. My Fort Worth apartment felt too quiet, the air thick with the residue of the flu and the looming weight of the truth I was about to uncover. I spent the morning drinking black coffee and staring at my laptop, waiting for the notification from Sloan. I knew that once I opened that file, my relationship with my parents would never be the same. I just didn't realize how deep the rot actually went. When the email finally arrived, the subject line was simple: preliminary investigation results. I clicked it open, my heart hammering against my ribs. Sloan hadn't just looked at their bank accounts. She had dug into public records, credit reports, and professional filings. The first page was a summary of Archibald's financial state. It was a disaster. 3 years ago, Archibald had been censured by the regulatory board. He had recommended high-risk, unsuitable investments to several elderly clients, people who had trusted him with their life savings. The investments had tanked, and while he hadn't lost his license entirely, his reputation in the Arlington financial circles was effectively dead. He had been forced to pay heavy fines, and his client base had evaporated. He wasn't a successful financial advisor anymore. He was a man playing a part, maintaining the image of a high earner while his income had dropped to nearly zero. Then came the loans. Minnie and Archibald had taken out a second mortgage on the family home 18 months ago at a predatory interest rate of 12%. That was followed by 3 private loans from lenders that specialized in high-interest bridge financing. The total debt outside of their primary mortgage was nearly $500,000. I leaned back, the coffee turning bitter in my mouth. $500,000. They weren't just paying for Phyllis's medical school. They were servicing a mountain of debt created by Archibald's professional failures and Minnie's refusal to stop living like a wealthy realtor. Every time they asked me for a little help for Phyllis, the money was actually going to keep the lights on and the creditors at bay. And then there was Phyllis. Sloan had looked into the Yale payments. While the tuition was indeed high, it had been largely covered by the initial loans. The $20,000 my mother had begged for wasn't for a final payment. It was for a debt service interest payment due at the end of the month to prevent a default that would trigger a foreclosure on the house. But the most devastating part of the report was a small note at the bottom regarding Phyllis's academic standing. Sloan had found records, publicly accessible if you knew where to look, that showed she had been under investigation for academic dishonesty during her second year. There were anomalies in her exam scores that matched several other students in a cheating ring. She hadn't been expelled, but she was on a razor's edge. Her shining doctor future was a house of cards built on top of a sinkhole. I closed my eyes, a single thought echoing in my mind. They were going to let me go down with them. My father's family fund wasn't a strategic investment. It was a trap. He wanted to fold my thriving, debt-free company into his mess so he could use my assets to collateralize his failures. He was willing to risk the livelihoods of my 15 employees, my reputation, and my future to save a sister who was faking her way through medical school. I couldn't stay in the apartment. I needed to see what I had built, to remind myself that I was more than their backup plan. I drove to the warehouse in Fort Worth, the 20,000 square foot facility that served as the heart of my business. As I pulled into the lot, the familiar hum of activity greeted me. Forklifts were moving pallets of hardware kits, tablets, and sensory tools for our latest international contract. My operations manager, Sims, met me at the loading dock. Sims was a retired logistics expert who didn't care about prestige. He cared about efficiency and results. "Daine, you look like a ghost," Sims said, his brow furrowed. "I thought you were out until Monday." "I needed to check in, Sims. How are we looking on the Canada shipment?" "Ahead of schedule. We've got the localizers working on the French-Canadian modules as we speak. We're shipping to 40 schools by Tuesday." I walked through the rows of servers and the packing stations. This wasn't a hobby. This was a global operation. This was real impact. Every child who learned to read using my app was a testament to the work I'd put in while my parents were busy ignoring me. In the back corner of the warehouse, I saw Hawk. He was wearing grease-stained overalls, hunched over one of the server racks. He worked for me part-time, helping maintain our hardware. He didn't have to. I had offered to just pay his tuition, but Hawk refused. He said he wanted to learn how the systems worked from the inside out. "Hey, Hawk," I called out. He looked up, a genuine smile breaking across his face. "Daine, you're alive! I heard you were dying of the plague." "Almost. You okay? You look tired." Hawk wiped his hands on a rag. "Just finishing up a lab report before my shift, and Archibald is breathing down my neck about his car. It needs a new transmission, and he's acting like I'm the one who broke it." "Has he asked you for money, Hawk?" Hawk went quiet, his eyes dropping to the floor. "He asked if I had any leftover from my scholarship, said Mom needed it for her nerves. I told him it was all gone." My blood boiled. They were even trying to squeeze the youngest, the one with the least to give. "Listen to me, Hawk," I said, stepping closer. "Don't give them a cent, not a single penny. Do you understand?" "I know, Daine. I see what they do. I see how they treat you. It's like you're only family when there's a bill to pay." I looked at my brother, hardworking, honest, and completely undervalued by the people who should have loved him most. An idea began to take shape in my mind. It was a plan that would protect Hawk and expose the truth all at once. "Hawk, you're graduating next month, right?" "Yeah. Got a job offer from an aerospace firm downtown. It's decent, but I'm going to be commuting 2 hours a day because I can't afford anything closer." "Don't worry about the commute," I said, my voice steady. "I have a plan for your graduation gift, and I think you're going to like it." He laughed, unaware of the scale of what I was thinking. "A new set of tools would be great, Daine, seriously." "Better than tools, Hawk. Way better." I left the warehouse and called my real estate broker, Irene. She had helped me find the warehouse, and she was the most discreet person I knew in the industry. "Irene, it's Daine. I need a property, a condo, high-end, near the aerospace district in downtown Fort Worth. 1 bedroom, modern, ready for immediate move-in." "That's a hot area, Daine. You looking for an investment?" "No," I said, looking back at the warehouse where my little hobby was thriving. "I'm looking for a lifeboat for my brother. I want to buy it in cash, no mortgage, no paper trail that leads back to my parents' names. I want the deed in his name only." "I can find you 3 options by tonight," Irene promised. As I drove back to my apartment, my phone buzzed again. It was a group text from Minnie, including me, Phyllis, and Archibald. "Dinner this Sunday at the Grill to celebrate Hawk's upcoming graduation and Phyllis's new rotation. Everyone be there by 7 p.m. Daine, we need to talk about that family fund project your father mentioned. It's time we all started acting like a unit." I stared at the message. Acting like a unit. It was the perfect phrasing for a group of people trying to absorb a successful outlier into their own failure. I didn't reply. Instead, I sent a message to Sloan. "Prepare the trust documents. I want 80% of my company's shares moved into an irrevocable trust by Monday. If they want to talk about family funds, I'm going to make sure there's nothing left for them to touch." The Monday morning air in Fort Worth was crisp, but inside the offices of my legal counsel, the atmosphere was clinical and cold. I sat across from the desk, watching the printer whir as it produced the documents that would effectively end my parents' ability to ever touch my life's work. I was moving 80% of my company's shares into an irrevocable trust. In the eyes of the law, those assets would no longer belong to me personally. I would be the trustee, but the wealth would be locked away for the long-term growth of the business and for specifically named beneficiaries. My parents were not on that list. As I signed my name, Daine, over and over again on the thick stacks of parchment, I felt a weight lifting that I hadn't even realized I was carrying. For years, I had walked on eggshells, worried that if I became too successful, they would find a way to take it, and if I wasn't successful enough, they would discard me. Now I was making it impossible for them to do either. I was choosing to be invisible on my own terms. The paperwork was almost finished when my phone buzzed on the mahogany table. It was Archibald. I didn't answer. I knew exactly what he wanted. He wanted to check in on my liquidity before the big family dinner. He wanted to make sure the unit was ready to absorb the surplus. A few seconds later, a voicemail notification popped up. Daine, it's Dad. Look, I've been reviewing some of the numbers for that family strategy I mentioned. We really need to sit down before Sunday. There are some urgent, let's call them opportunities for Phyllis's career that require immediate capital. I've already drafted some of the paperwork to bring Edgenova under the family umbrella. It'll save you a fortune in taxes, sweetheart. Call me. Sweetheart? The word felt like a slur. He had already drafted paperwork to take over my company without even asking me. He wasn't even hiding the theft anymore. He was wrapping it in the guise of tax planning. He truly believed I was that naive, that the little app girl wouldn't understand the difference between a tax shelter and a hostile takeover by her own father. I looked at the lawyer and slid the final signed page across the desk. It's done then. They can't touch it. Daine, this trust is a fortress, she assured me. Even if they sued you, even if they tried to claim you were mentally unfit, these assets are shielded. You've successfully separated your professional life from your family's liabilities. They can scream all they want, but the vault is closed. I left the office and headed straight to the warehouse. I needed to see Sims and check on the condo progress with Irene. When I arrived, the warehouse was in a frenzy of activity. We had just secured a new contract with a school district in Singapore, and the logistics of international shipping were keeping everyone on their toes. Sims met me at the door, clutching a clipboard. Daine, we've got a problem. Some guy in a flashy suit showed up an hour ago asking to see the inventory books. Said he was a representative of your father's firm. My stomach dropped. Wasserman. That's the one. Tall, expensive watch, talked like he owned the place. I told him to kick rocks, but he got pretty nasty, said I was just hired help, and that the real management was taking over soon. I felt a surge of adrenaline that had nothing to do with the flu. Wasserman, Phyllis's fiancé, was already acting like my warehouse was his personal playground. He was Archibald's attack dog, the one sent to scout the perimeter before the main assault. Where is he now, Sims? I ran him off, but he's parked across the street in that white Mercedes. I think he's waiting for you. I didn't hesitate. I walked out of the warehouse and across the asphalt lot. The Texas sun was beating down, and the heat was rising off the pavement in waves. I saw the car, and sure enough, Wasserman was leaning against the door, checking his reflection in the tinted window. When he saw me, he put on a practiced, oily smile. Daine, there she is, the woman of the hour. I was just telling your manager here that we should probably look at upgrading the security. Once we merge the accounts, we'll want everything top of the line. I stopped 10 feet away from him. There is no we, Wasserman, and there is no merger. What are you doing at my place of business? His smile didn't falter, but his eyes turned hard. Look, Daine, let's not play games. Archibald told me everything. We know the company is doing well. We know you have the cash. Phyllis is struggling, and the family is under a lot of pressure. It's time to stop playing CEO in your little garage and let the men handle the finances. You'll still get your creative title, of course. You can keep playing with your apps. Is that what Archibald told you? That I'm just playing? He told me you're a smart girl who's gotten lucky, but you're out of your depth. He's trying to protect you from yourself, Diane. If you don't cooperate, this gets a lot less friendly. The family is in a hole, and you're the only one with the ladder. Don't be the reason your sister loses her medical license before she even starts. Her license? I asked, feigning ignorance. I thought she was the star student. Wasserman's face twitched. He knew he'd said too much. You know what I mean. The debt, the stress. It's all connected. Just be at dinner on Sunday, Diane, and bring your banking logins. Archibald wants to get the transfer started before the Monday morning bell. I'll be at dinner, Wasserman, I said, my voice dangerously calm. But I won't be bringing any logins. Tell Archibald to save his breath on the family fund pitch. I have a much better announcement to make.
He laughed, a sharp, condescending sound. Whatever you say, kid. See you at the grill. Don't be late. Minnie hates it when the appetizers get cold. He got into his car and sped off, leaving a cloud of dust behind. I stood there for a long moment, breathing in the smell of exhaust and diesel. They weren't even trying to hide it anymore. He was a shakedown, pure and simple. They were using Phyllis's debt as a weapon, and they were using Wasserman as the muscle. I pulled out my phone and called Irene. Irene, tell me you have good news about the condo. I have great news, Diane. The unit on 4th Street is ours. I pushed the seller for an all-cash 48-hour close. The keys are in my hand. It's beautiful. Floor-to-ceiling windows right in the heart of the district where Hawk's new office is. He can walk to work in 5 minutes. In the deed? In Hawk's name only, just like you asked. Your name isn't on a single public document. As far as the world is concerned, Hawk is the sole owner of a $500,000 property. Perfect. Keep the keys until Sunday morning. I'll pick them up then. I hung up and looked back at my warehouse, my little hobby. Tomorrow, the family would gather at a fancy restaurant to celebrate Hawk's graduation, but they would spend the whole time talking about Phyllis. They would try to corner me. They would try to shame me into giving up everything I had built to pay for their lies and their failures. But they didn't know about the trust. They didn't know about the condo, and they certainly didn't know that I had the evidence of Archibald's censure and Phyllis's cheating ring in my bag. They wanted a unit. I was going to give them one. I was going to show them exactly what a unit looked like when the most invisible member decided to finally stand up and turn on the lights. I walked back into the warehouse and found Sims. Sims, I want you to give everyone Monday off. Paid. Tell them we're celebrating a major transition. Everything okay, boss? Everything is finally exactly where it needs to be, Sims. We're moving into a new phase, and some people are about to find out that hired help is a lot more loyal than family. I went back to my office and started preparing the final presentation. Not for a school district and not for an investor. This was for the people who shared my DNA, but none of my values. The storm was coming, and for the first time in my life, I wasn't the one who needed an umbrella. Saturday evening in Fort Worth always had a specific energy, the skyline glowing with a mix of old Texas grit and new tech money. Usually I loved this time of week. It was when the warehouse was quiet, the servers were humming efficiently, and I could finally breathe. But this Saturday was different. I wasn't breathing. I was vibrating with a mix of anticipation and a strange, cold grief. I was about to dismantle my family's reality. And while they deserved it, there is a specific kind of mourning that happens when you realize your parents truly view you as a financial asset rather than a human being. I sat in my office, the desk lamp casting long shadows across the dossier Sloan had finalized for me. It was all there. The high-interest loans, the second mortgage, the FINRA censure against Archibald, and the documented evidence of Phyllis's academic shortcuts. It was a map of a decade of deception. My parents hadn't just been supporting Phyllis, they had been betting on her to win a race she was already disqualified from, and they were planning to use my life's work to pay off the bookies. The phone rang. It was Irene, the real estate broker. Daine, I'm standing in the condo right now, Irene said, her voice echoing slightly against the hardwood floors of the new unit. I just did the final walkthrough. It's perfect. I left the keys in a leather pouch on the kitchen island. The deed is officially recorded in Hawk's name. It's a clean, beautiful start for that boy. I hope he knows how lucky he is to have you. He doesn't know yet, Irene. He thinks he's moving into a converted garage near the airport. He thinks he's going to be spending half his paycheck on gas just to get to his new engineering job. Well, he's in for the shock of a lifetime, Irene laughed. But Daine, are you sure about this? You're spending over $500,000 in cash. That's a lot of security to give away. It's not giving it away, Irene. It's investing it where it actually matters. Hawk is the only person in that family who ever treated me like I was more than a hobby. When I was bartending at 2 in the morning to pay for my first server, he was the one who would bring me coffee and help me carry boxes. He never judged me. He never asked for a handout. He deserves to start his life without a weight around his neck. You're a good sister, Daine. I'll see you soon. I hung up and felt a rare smile touch my face. For the first time in years, I wasn't spending money to fix a problem Minnie or Archibald had created. I was spending it to create a future. But then the texts started again. The unit was getting restless. Minnie sent a photo of a dress she'd bought for the dinner. Found this at the boutique today. A bit pricey, but I told the shop owner my daughter is a Yale doctor and my other daughter is a tech mogul. We have to look the part tomorrow. Don't forget, 7 p.m. sharp at the grill. Your father has the documents ready for your signature. A tech mogul. Suddenly, now that they needed a bailout, I wasn't tinkering anymore. I was a mogul. The hypocrisy was so thick I could almost taste it. I decided to stop by Hawk's apartment. I needed to see him, to ground myself in why I was doing this before I walked into the lion's den the next day. Hawk lived in a cramped one-bedroom unit in a part of town that smelled like diesel and old grease. He was packing his few belongings into cardboard boxes when I knocked. Daine, what are you doing here? You should be resting. You still look a little pale from that flu, Hawk said, pulling me into a quick hug. His apartment was hot, the AC was struggling against the Texas humidity, and his small table was covered in engineering blueprints and empty tuna cans. I'm fine, Hawk. Just wanted to see how the packing was going. It's going, he sighed, gesturing to the 3 boxes on the floor. I don't have much. Most of my money went to tuition and keeping that old car running. I'm a little worried about this new place near the airport, though. The landlord hasn't sent the lease over yet, and the neighborhood is, well, it's not great. But hey, it's a start, right? It's a start, I agreed, my heart aching for him. Are you coming to the dinner tomorrow? Hawk's face darkened. I have to. Mom said she'd stop calling me every hour if I showed up. But Daine, be careful. Dad is talking about this family fund like it's already a done deal. He told me that once you sign over the management, he's going to buy me a new car. I told him I didn't want a car bought with your money, but he just laughed and said I didn't understand how big business works.
He said that? That he's going to buy you a car with my money? Yeah, and Phyllis is already talking about moving into a bigger place in Connecticut for her residency. She told Wasserman that your surplus was going to cover the down payment. They're vultures, Daine, all of them. I sat down on one of the boxes. And what about you, Hawk? What do you want? He looked at me, surprised by the question. I just want to work, Daine. I want to build things. I want to earn my own way and not have to listen to Archibald brag about legacy while he's secretly asking me for my scholarship money. I just want to be free of them. You will be, I whispered. I promise you. By tomorrow night, everything changes. Hawk looked at me, his eyes narrowing. What are you planning? You have that look you get when a server goes down and you're about to rewrite the entire back end. I'm just doing a little maintenance on the family, Hawk. Don't worry about it. Just bring your appetite tomorrow, and maybe a pair of walking shoes. I left his apartment and drove back to my place, the weight of the dossier in the passenger seat feeling more like a shield than a burden. I spent the rest of the night rehearsing. I knew exactly how it would go. Archibald would start with a toast. He would talk about Phyllis's brilliance and my good fortune. He would try to make me feel like I owed the family for the support they'd given me over the years. Then he would slide the papers across the table, the ones Wasserman had mentioned, the ones that would move my company under his control. He expected me to be the same girl who used to cry in her room because they forgot her birthday while planning Phyllis's debutante ball. He expected me to be desperate for their approval. But the woman who built Edunova didn't need their approval. She had the data. She had the truth. And most importantly, she had the keys to a kingdom they would never be allowed to enter. I checked my email one last time before bed. A message from Sloan. Everything is locked. The trust is active. The company is untouchable. Whatever happens tomorrow, they can't take what you've built. Enjoy the dinner, Daine. You've earned this moment.
I closed my laptop and laid in the dark, listening to the city. Tomorrow, the invisible daughter was going to become very, very visible. And the golden sister was going to find out what happens when you build a life on top of someone else's foundation. I wasn't the backup plan anymore. I was the architect of my own life. And Hawk was about to find out that his sister was a lot more than just a hobbyist. Minnie's final text of the night came in at midnight. "Sleep well, mogul. Tomorrow is a big day for the family. We're finally going to be whole again." I didn't reply. I just turned off the phone. I knew what she meant by whole. She meant my bank account filling their empty pockets. But by tomorrow night, the only thing that would be whole was my conscience. I fell asleep with the image of those silver keys in my mind, sitting on a kitchen island in a condo that Archibald and Minnie would never even see the inside of. The storm was here, and for the first time, I was the one directing the wind.
Sunday night arrived with a heavy, humid heat that seemed to cling to the pavement of downtown Fort Worth. I pulled into the valet at the Grill, a restaurant that specialized in $100 steaks and a level of pretension that usually made me itch. It was exactly the kind of place Minnie loved. Low lighting, white tablecloths, and enough crystal to make everything feel expensive, even if the people sitting at the tables were morally bankrupt. I stepped out of my car, clutching the leather portfolio that contained the deed to Hawk's new life and the folder that would end my parents' charade. I walked through the heavy mahogany doors and was immediately spotted by Minnie. She was wearing the pricey dress she'd bragged about, a shimmering champagne silk that made her look every bit the successful realtor she no longer was. "Daine, you're here! And you look functional," Minnie said, her eyes scanning my simple blazer and jeans with a hint of disapproval. "We're at the corner booth. Your father has been checking his watch every 5 minutes." I followed her to the table. Archibald was already there, looking tense, his fingers drumming a restless rhythm on the tablecloth. Phyllis and Wasserman were sitting across from him, sipping expensive wine and laughing at something on Wasserman's phone. Hawk sat at the end of the table, looking like he wanted to crawl into the floorboards. "Glad you could make it, Daine," Archibald said, his voice tight. "We've got a lot to celebrate tonight. Hawk's graduation, Phyllis's residency, and the new direction for the family." "It's great to see everyone," I said, sliding into the seat next to Hawk. I reached under the table and squeezed his hand. He looked at me, a silent question in his eyes, and I just gave him a small, reassuring nod. The appetizers arrived. Oysters, Wagyu sliders, things that felt like a slap in the face considering the $500,000 debt I knew was sitting on their shoulders. Throughout the meal, the conversation followed the usual script. Minnie talked about her high-end listings, Phyllis complained about the stress of Yale, and Wasserman made jabs at my warehouse. "So, Daine," Wasserman said, leaning back and swirling his Cabernet, "Archibald mentioned you're finally ready to take the business to the next level. It's about time. That warehouse is a bit of a relic, don't you think? We were thinking of moving the operations closer to a tax haven once the merger goes through." "The merger?" I asked, looking directly at Archibald. Archibald cleared his throat and pulled a stack of documents from his briefcase. "Daine, as we discussed, I've drafted the Edunova Thompson Family Agreement. It's simple, really. You move the company's controlling interest into this fund, and I manage the assets. It frees you up to do the creative work you love, and it ensures that Phyllis has the liquidity she needs to finish her journey. It's a win-win." "And what about Hawk?" I asked, my voice steady. Minnie waved a hand dismissively. "Hawk will be taken care of, dear. He's an engineer. He'll always have a job. But Phyllis is a doctor. She's the legacy. We have to prioritize the investments that give the highest return." I looked at Hawk, who was staring down at his plate, his jaw clenched. Then I looked at Phyllis, who was smiling at me like I was a particularly slow child.
I agree, I said. We should prioritize the people who actually work for their future, which is why I have a graduation gift for Hawk. I pulled the leather portfolio from my bag and slid it across the table to my brother. What is this? Hawk asked, his voice trembling slightly. Open it, I said. Hawk unzipped the portfolio and pulled out the deed. He read the address, then the name on the title. His eyes went wide. Daine, is this a condo on 4th Street?
Paid in full, Hawk, I said. No mortgage, no debt. It's 2 blocks from your new office. It's yours. Your name is the only one on that document. The table went dead silent. The only sound was the clinking of silverware from a nearby table. Minnie's fork hit her plate with a sharp ping. Archibald leaned forward, his face turning a dark, mottled red. You did what? Archibald hissed. I bought Hawk a home, Dad. I used my little hobby money to give him the stability you've been denying him for years. $550,000? Wasserman barked, his face twisting in disbelief. You spent over $500,000 on a condo for a kid who hasn't even started his first job? I did, I said, and I did it with cash. Minnie let out a strangled sound, her hand flying to her throat. Diane, how could you be so reckless? That money, we had plans. Your father told you we needed that capital for Phyllis. No, Mom, I said, pulling the second folder from my bag. You needed that money to pay off the $500,000 in debt you've racked up. You needed it to service the 12% interest on your second mortgage. You needed it because Dad got censured by FINRA 3 years ago for scamming elderly clients and hasn't made a real commission since. The color drained from Archibald's face so fast, he looked like he was going to faint. Phyllis dropped her glass of wine, the red liquid staining the white tablecloth like a bloodstain. Where did you get that? Archibald whispered, his voice shaking. I have an advisor, remember? One who actually knows how to do her job? I know about the private loans. I know about the final tuition payment being a lie to cover a debt default. And I know about Phyllis's little cheating ring at Yale. Phyllis jumped to her feet, her face contorted in a mask of pure rage. You bitch! You're lying! You're just jealous because I'm the one they actually care about. Care about? I asked, standing up to meet her. They don't care about you, Phyllis. They care about the prestige you represent. They've gambled their entire lives on a fraud, and they expected me to be the one to pay the tab. Well, the tab is closed. Archibald slammed his hand on the table, the wine bottles rattling. That money was for her loans, he screamed, his voice echoing through the entire restaurant. The dining room went silent, every head turned toward our table. Minnie was sobbing now, her pricey dress shivering with her breath. That money was mine, I said, my voice echoing in the sudden quiet. And now it belongs to Hawk. He's the only one in this family who ever saw me as a person. He's the only one who didn't try to harvest me. He's going to live in that condo, and he's going to start his life without your shadows hanging over him. Before we get to the final fallout and see how the golden child handled the truth, make sure you're subscribed. This story is a wild ride. Hawk stood up, clutching the deed to his chest like a shield. He looked at Minnie, then at Archibald, then at the sister he'd lived in the shadow of for 22 years. Is it true? The cheating? The debt? Stephen, sweetie, we did it for us, Minnie whimpered, using his middle name in a pathetic attempt to sound maternal. We did it for the family's future. No, Hawk. You did it for yourselves. Diane is right. You never saw us. You just saw what you could get from us. He looked at me, a look of profound gratitude and sadness in his eyes. I'm going, Diane. I'll call you tomorrow. Go, Hawk, I said. The keys are on the island. Hawk walked out of the restaurant, his head held high. I watched him go, feeling a sense of pride that outweighed the chaos at the table. I turned back to my parents. Archibald was staring at the Edunova-Thompson agreement, realizing it was now nothing more than a piece of trash. The trust is active, Dad. 80% of my company is in an irrevocable trust. You can't sue me for it, you can't manage it, and you certainly can't use it to pay for Phyllis's mistakes. You're on your own now. I pulled $100 bill from my pocket and dropped it on the table. For the appetizers. The rest is on you. I walked out of the grill, leaving the screams of my mother and the desperate threats of my father behind me. The Fort Worth air felt cooler now, cleaner. The invisible daughter had finally left the building, and she wasn't coming back.
I still can't believe it's mine, Daine, Hawk said, running a hand over the granite countertop. I kept waking up last night thinking Archibald was going to walk through the door and tell me it was actually for Phyllis. He can't walk through this door, Hawk. Your name is the only one on the deed, and your name is the only one on the security system. You're free. I took the job at the aerospace firm, he told me, a spark of genuine excitement in his eyes. I start Monday, and Daine, I want to help you with the warehouse on the weekends. Not for money, just because I want to be part of what you're building. Real building. You're always welcome, Hawk, but you focus on your career first. You've earned your own path. My own company, Edunova, continued to thrive. With the family drama excised like a tumor, I was able to focus entirely on our international expansion. Sims and I finalized the Singapore contract, and we began looking into localized modules for the South American market. We grew from 15 employees to 25, and our 20,000 square foot warehouse was now humming with more efficiency than ever. I was no longer the invisible daughter. I was a leader who had protected her people and her future from the very people who should have been her biggest supporters. The last time I heard from Minnie was a month ago. She sent a long, rambling text message filled with the same guilt-tripping tactics she'd used for decades. Daine, your father is ill. He's working so hard, and his heart just isn't what it used to be. Phyllis is drowning in bills, and it's just heartbreaking to see her talent go to waste. We know you're doing so well. We see the news about your company. How can you live in that big apartment knowing your parents are struggling in a place like this? That money was supposed to be for family. Please, just call us. Let's put this behind us and be a unit again. I read the message twice. I thought about the $550,000 I'd spent on Hawk's condo. I thought about the 10 years of mockery, the $20,000 small favor they'd asked for while I was sick with the flu, and the way Archibald had screamed that my hard-earned money was for her loans. I didn't feel anger. I didn't feel spite. I just felt finished. I didn't reply. I simply blocked the number. I blocked Archibald's number, and I blocked Phyllis's too. I had given them every opportunity to be a family, and they had chosen to be predators. I had chosen to be a sister to the one person who deserved it, and that was enough for me. Tonight, I'm sitting on my balcony in Fort Worth, looking toward the downtown lights where Hawk's condo sits. He's probably working on a design or watching the sunset, finally unburdened by the weight of a sister's destiny. My business is secure, my brother is safe, and the silence in my life is finally a peaceful one. My name is Daine, and I learned the hard way that blood might make you related, but loyalty, respect, and hard work are what make you family. I gave my brother a house, but in the process, I finally gave myself a home. If this story resonated with you, please take a moment to like and subscribe, but only if you genuinely connect with what I've told you. Drop a comment and let me know. Was I too harsh on my parents, or would you have done the exact same thing to protect your brother? Thank you for watching, and remember, your hard work belongs to you, not to people who only call when the bill is due.
The drive back to my Fort Worth apartment was the quietest 30 minutes of my entire life. There was no radio, no GPS navigation voice, just the sound of the tires on the pavement and the rhythmic thumping of my heart. I kept expecting a sense of regret to wash over me, a wave of that old familiar guilt that Minnie had spent 34 years carefully cultivating, but it never came. Instead, there was only a profound sense of lightness, as if I had finally cut the anchor that had been dragging me toward the bottom of my family's self-made ocean. The fallout didn't happen all at once. It was a slow, agonizing crumble that played out over the following 6 months. Because I had moved 80% of Adunava into an irrevocable trust, the family fund Archibald had been banking on was dead on arrival. He tried to contest the trust, of course. He hired a lawyer, ironically with money he probably didn't have, claiming that I had been unduly influenced by Sloan. But the trust was a fortress. The legal challenge was dismissed within weeks, and the process only served to draw more attention to Archibald's own questionable financial history. The $500,000 in debt that Minnie and Archibald had been juggling finally reached its tipping point. Without my little hobby money to service the interest, the private lenders moved in. The second mortgage on their Arlington home went into default by the end of the second month. I watched from a distance, through public filings and the occasional update from Sloan, as the foreclosure proceedings began. The house I grew up in, the one with the bay window they've given to Phyllis because she was the serious student, was sold at a loss on the courthouse steps. Archibald's professional life met an even grimmer end. When the creditors began investigating his assets, they stumbled upon the same FINRA censure I had uncovered. The regulatory board, nudged by an anonymous tip that likely came from one of the many clients he had burned, reopened his file. Within 90 days, his license was revoked. The financial advisor who had spent a decade mocking my business model was now legally barred from giving financial advice to a goldfish. He ended up taking a job at a big box retail store, working the graveyard shift just to keep up with his basic living expenses. Minnie didn't fare much better. Her high-end realtor circle was built on the perception of wealth and prestige. Once the foreclosure became public knowledge and the doctor in the family narrative began to fray, her clients vanished. The garden clubs and charity boards she used to frequent suddenly had no room for her. She moved with Archibald into a cramped two-bedroom apartment on the outskirts of town, a place that smelled of stale air and broken dreams. Then there was Phyllis. The golden child found out the hard way that gold is often just a thin plating over lead. The cheating ring at Yale was fully exposed shortly after our dinner at the Grill. Whether it was the stress of the debt or the realization that her safety net was gone, Phyllis's performance plummeted. When the university's internal investigation concluded, she wasn't just reprimanded, she was expelled. Because she had co-signed the high-interest loans for her lifestyle and tuition, she was left with nearly $300,000 in non-dischargeable debt and no medical degree to pay it off. Wasserman, true to his nature, didn't stick around for the collapse. The man who once called my warehouse a toy box was a salesman of prestige, and once the prestige was gone, he was out the door. He broke off the engagement via text message, citing irreconcilable lifestyle differences. He was seen 2 weeks later at a country club with a woman whose father owned a string of car dealerships. He had been looking for a payday, not a partner, and Phyllis had finally run out of currency. Phyllis ended up working in a low-level administrative role at a rural clinic, a job that paid just enough to prevent her from starving, but not nearly enough to ever clear the mountain of debt she had accumulated. The sister who used to tell me it was adorable how I played with code was now spending 40 hours a week filing insurance claims for people she used to look down on. In the middle of all this chaos, there was Hawk. Hawk moved into the condo on 4th Street the day after the graduation dinner. I went over to help him unpack, bringing a few boxes of high-end tools and a brand new laptop as an extra welcome home gift. He stood in the center of his living room looking out at the Fort Worth skyline through the floor-to-ceiling windows, and for the first time in his life, he looked like he was breathing.